y'all doing this morning?
Doing great.
Yeah?
Snow is shoveled.
Yeah. That was a bust, huh?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
All the guys are like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
The rest of us that don't shovel, like, oh, the snow would have been nice.
I still shoveled. My driveway shoveled, but man, it's better. That 1.5 inches of slush was better than, 3 to 6 inches of heavy snow,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for jumping on. Today's topic is pricing homes in a seller's market. Woo! It's tough out there, huh?
Talk to me, people.
It's crazy. It's insane. Yeah, talk to me too. I mean, it's crazy. So I just went to guessing instead. That just seemed like just go really high because that just seems to work. Kidding. All right, what are you guys doing? How are you pricing homes?
High.
High, yeah, exactly. Real high.
Pricing high. And they still seem to be selling.
Yeah. So I talked about this to Dakota a couple weeks ago, and she said, let's see if I can remember her quote now. She said, we're not comping houses. It's not about comping the homes. It's about strategizing, right? So it could, because I mean, there really aren't any comps out there, are there? I mean, every time I've done it, I haven't really seen any comps. And it ends up being more about, having doors and windows than updated kitchens and finished basements.
Yep.
Right. I mean, as far as from what I'm seeing and, as far as what Dakota said too, I mean, when you're comping houses and you're looking at that as, okay, this house is really updated. This one isn't. I found them to come on the market just as high and sell higher. What are you guys seeing?
Well, I'll just gonna comment that I'm still seeing certain homes not selling, days on market on certain properties, and even expireds. So it's not like the sky's the limit.
Right.
You still need to do your work and price it correctly. But on the other end of it, I think maybe it's the certain price points, like, in the fours. Those are the ones that are, getting the crazy attention and multiple offers.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you think, Bill, that those some of those expireds and houses that have been sitting for a while, is it primarily due to price, or is it just for other reasons too, unique homes and the price? What are your thoughts on some of the ones that you were just thinking about?
Yeah, there could be, some other factors that, it's like, it could be the type of home that's only for a specific buyer. But I think in large part, I think maybe it might've been an overzealous seller on their listing price, just hearing, hey, the market's completely to my advantage, so I'm just gonna throw up a crazy high number and I'll get it. And that's not always the case.
Hey, Bob, I thought there's really two separate situations. A new listing is one thing. And I agree with what Kristen said about what Dakota says. It's about pricing strategy, although you need to do a CMA. You need to comp it first. But then there's a strategy is how you put it on, when you put it on. Do you go open house first? There's a number of different ways. And that's when my experience most recently has been with expireds. And that's a different animal. And so I'll tell you, I have 3 expireds that I put on the market. Well, I should say 2, because one sold before it even got on the market. But I put 2 on the market. One was on for 365 days. Took it as an expired listing, and we sold it in 1 day. So in 1 day. The second one was, and that was in Medford. The second one was in South Boston. It was on the market for 92 days, and we put it in the market and sold in 1 day.
Bob, did you price it at the same price that it
No.
was listed at, or did you
No.
price it lower or higher?
Well, in both cases, it was low. You can't, I mean, that's the strategy part of it. And I think, and by the way, and the buyers that I got, so I priced it low, slightly low, because it was clear that they were both overpriced, and I priced it lower. And I got one offer in each, and that's all I got. There was a lot of activity, but there were no other offers coming in. And so that's part of the strategy piece. And so what I elected to do, and I've been doing, by the way, I have another one that I'm working on now in East Boston. That's that I got to go back and price it. And it's the thing, I lose sleep over pricing, because if you screw it up, you're stuck. And I think I was, on these two that we put under, I'm a bit surprised, but I got it. And here's the way I did it, was I put them on at the beginning of the week. I did not advertise an open house. Now, these are expired listings, so they got history and some baggage, and you got to understand what the baggage was from before. And I got that factored in and addressed some issues. Part of it was pricing was only one. In fact, it wasn't the price. It was how it was marketed or not marketed. It's how it was staged, how it was described. There's a whole bunch of things. But what I elected to do is, because I wasn't comfortable that these would go in, if I put them on and had an open house and let the crowds come in, I just didn't feel comfortable. So what I've been doing on listings is to leak them out and put them on beginning of the week. Ask them to call the listing agent. Don't set it up on showing time, and don't promote the open house, and look at the activity and look at the interest and figure out what to do about it. And with that, in both cases, I had multiple showings during the week. So all of a sudden there was a little bit of interest. I want to see it. Then I filter them out and find the serious ones. And I just did, I started to block showing. Somebody said, I want to see it on Thursday afternoon, and okay. And I blocked others, and I was able to block them. And out of both cases, I got offers. And by the way, both cases, I got over asking offers. So it's about, and I think this thing about the open house on a new listing is one thing, but on an expired listing, there's baggage. And for some reason, I just think that to kind of go in there and look at it, because when you're coming in at an open house and you got all these people, I want to know what the interest level is before, so that what I could do during the week, as I get interest, and even I got offers, I went back and tested with the other ones. Said an offer came in, got an offer in. I just want to give you a heads up, and I could determine what the interest level was by the other ones. So it's kind of it's a real hands-on approach, and I can't say that I can reproduce it. I didn't expect to reproduce it the second time, and I did, and I got one in East Boston, the same thing. So that's just that's what goes on. What I find with expireds, and it's not the price, because on both of them, one was on it, one was off the market at 549, and I put it back on at 525, and it got 530. And the other one was on 365 days at 385. I priced it at 375, and I got 380. Figure that. So it's really about, I think it's the finesse. It's about how you work with buyers, how you get, I dig into it, and because I know that they're tough ones. I said, this is tough. And by the way, the photos were much better. They had virtual tours. So everything about it, I restaged them. Everything about them was better. But just that, I say to myself, this shouldn't account for suddenly getting offers. I think it's how you manage, at least for me, it's how you manage the interest level.
Hey, Bob, I think, with that being said too, I think that those stories that, you have on those two comps or on those two homes, I think are great examples to use when you're in front of another another seller down the road. Maybe somebody who's thinking about going FSBO, or is a FSBO, or isn't expired. Stories sell, right? And I think those are great examples of how, you turned a house that was on the market during the hottest market in the history of our, of our area, and it didn't sell. And you took it and it sold for $15,000 less than it was on the market for 365 days. I mean, that's just awesome.
Yeah. And well, I got one in South Boston. I mean, in East Boston, I'm meeting the sellers coming in from Florida. They left and it was on, and he wasn't going to do anything. And I used this, the same strategy and said, hey, this is what we did. And he's ready to sign, but he says to me, Bob, I need you to tell me what the price is going to be. And I said to him, that's a tricky part. So yeah, so it does work. The stories work, but I think one of the stories, it's how you go at that. So that's, and I can't say I could go reproduce this. I didn't expect to reproduce it the second time. I was curious, nervous, and suddenly it happened. So we'll see, three's a charm, We'll see what happens with this third listing.
There you go. Danny, are you there? Danny Zhang?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. So what are you finding? What's that?
I said I'm having my breakfast at the same time.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
No.
So how are you pricing houses in this market? What's your strategy?
Well, I'm still trying to get the seller to price it, price it right versus going too high or too low.
Mm-hmm.
And but the market has been really crazy. I mean, the price, like multiple offer situation, and the price are going over beyond the appraisal price, and that's part of some sellers' concern.
Mm-hmm.
And but there are people out there with higher down payments which they don't care. And but I think pricing right is still the key. Just get as many people coming through the open house as possible.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will drive up the price anyways.
Right. So you're suggesting they price a little lower in order to attract more people?
I suggest the price just competitive to the market price.
Uh-huh.
Based on the appraisal and the market analysis.
Do you have your clients do an appraisal before you list properties?
So I pretty much do the market analysis, like the appraisal style comparison with the homes, with the room count and the number of bathrooms, condition, and the size.
Okay.
So it's, when you done so many in the area, you know all the houses condition looks like, and you can compare it to the other. And I mean, I have seen 35 offers, within the last couple of weeks for some of really bad shape property, just like the one you post on Facebook. I mean, you wouldn't even consider buying it, and they get like 30, 40 offers. It's just crazy.
Right. That was pretty funny. Yeah, okay. Awesome. Who else has a strategy that they're using?
I have a question.
Yes.
How are you guys combating the seller who, obviously, and it's not just happening now, like it's happened before too, but, sellers know it's a seller's market. So how are you, phrasing that conversation or having that conversation where they want to list for $550, but you know that it should be at $499? Like, how are you having that conversation with them, and how is it working out, I guess?
And I think that's part of like why I thought we should have this, conversation today, because honestly, to your question, sometimes you really don't know what it should be priced at, depending on the house. That's the hardest part. And, sometimes and you can't find comps to support it either way. So, the conversation that I would have, depending on how far off they are and depending on what else is on the market or what could kind of compare to it, or, maybe there's only 2 houses on the market anyways in that town, all that would factor in. At this point, whether it's right or wrong, I would say, all right, well, let's price that, see what the market does, and just understand we may need to have a price break. Because I've lost listings because I've underpriced them recently.
Wow.
I've lost them because I've underpriced them. And I'm shocked because when they go to list with somebody else, the prices is so much higher than what my highest price was. And then they sell even higher. Shocking to me, like shocking. Like, I don't even understand why people would pay that kind of money for that type of house. You know, these are all outdated, you know, like, you know, family owned, you know, parents passed away, kids selling it type of homes that haven't been touched since it was built. And they're selling for crazy money. And sometimes you just don't know.
That's what's going on though. The next one's selling higher than the last one. And I put one together, you know, with a buyer of mine. And I'll tell you that I sized it up and I'm looking at the house and I'm like, there's no way this house is worth it. But I knew it was because I knew the market. They had an open house Saturday and Sunday. It was a house in Braintree. And there was a ton of people looking at it. The agent tells me there's 2 offers in hand. I'm like, really? I look at the comps. The thing, I felt guilty, but like she was on board with me. And we put the offer in, we got it. And then I was told it wasn't even the highest offer. I couldn't believe it. They went like way over asking. And I'm like, the comps would tell me it was worth less than asking. I mean, the comps are right there, but you can't believe the comps because the next one's selling higher than the last one and much higher, because what you got going on right now is just supply and demand. I don't know about the latest statistics, but as of a couple of weeks ago, we had about 7,000 homes on the market in the state. I mean, last year. This year, we're got like 3,000 homes. So, you know, we're in an upward trend. I mean, some of the houses, if they're expired, they're outliers, but you know, your average homes, especially in areas like Braintree, you can't comp it. And I think you could almost like be blindfolded and just throw a dart at the dartboard and hit the bullseye every time. It's more, you got more of a problem if you're on the buyer's end. But again, you don't want to lose, like to your point, Kristen, you don't want to lose a listing. And this is, if there's a time to go with a higher number, this is the time. And then you just set it up and say, listen, if we don't have an offer in like 1 week, we're lowering the price.
Right. And, you know, in my case, it was, would I've probably gotten the same price if I listed it lower? Would the price have run up to the same? Maybe. But for the seller, they want to go with the person that's going to give them the highest price right now, even though the end result could have been the same. So that's why I lost it for them. Yeah, because I've called the sellers and asked them why, and that's why, because I didn't feel the house was worth as much as somebody else did.
So Al, what happens when the appraisal comes in?
You worry about that when that happens. I mean, it's a good headache to have. That you can't underprice a house because you're afraid of the appraisal.
Right.
Well, don't forget too, and this is really, really important. I've been talking with all my clients about it. There's 2 different markets that we deal with, and this is something that we just kind of like a necessary evil in the mortgage industry. But when you're selling a house or you have a buyer making an offer, looking at houses and making offers on houses, you're in today's market. The appraisal, when it comes in 2 weeks from now, is based on the market from 3 months, 6 months ago, maybe 3-5 miles outside of where your subject property is. So the appraiser, and this is just, again, a necessary evil, has to deal with last year's market, whereas you guys right now are dealing with today's market right now and the market pressures that go along with it. So in this kind of a market, an appreciating market that we've seen over the last 12 months especially, but even over the last 10 years, in an appreciating market, houses should never comp out, because you're setting the bar today for what is now an appreciating market. Your sale today is what's making yesterday's sale increase in value, right? So theoretically, houses should never appraise out. So I guess I'm always surprised that, especially now, when a house doesn't comp out, that people are like surprised. You know, you knew that the split that you made an offer on for $550 was overpriced as it is, and you went and offered $575. You know, and you're surprised that we can't get it to comp out. That's just why I think it's really important that if you do have a buyer that's putting down more than a minimum amount, just to make sure that they know and are prepared with their lender that if the house doesn't appraise out, if it comes in 5% less, what do my numbers look like if I still buy the house for what we agreed at? Because you can do that. And oftentimes the numbers don't change very much. Payment number, payment wise, the difference in rate between a 5% down product and a 10% down product is the same rate. The PMI is just a little bit different. Your loan amount's going to be the same. The PMI just might be $50 a month more or something, So there's a lot of ways to deal with that. And I think that just getting out ahead of it's important. If you're a listing agent and saying, look, I know this isn't going to comp out. Or if you're showing a house and another realtor's walking through and they look at you, Kristen, and say, this is not going to comp out. You're like, damn straight it's not going to comp out. None of these houses should comp out. Mm-hmm. But somebody's going to pay it.
Yep.
And that's the market.
Yeah, Brad, I'll get you in a second because I see you have your hand up. But to your point with the appraisal too, that's why with this competitive market, and I know Bill Stone's been dealing with this a lot. They're overbidding, the prices are crazy, and really the list, you have to have a really strong buyer in this market, ones that will waive the appraisal or that have a lot of money to put down. If you're a listing agent and you've got a buyer offer that's 3.5% down FHA, like they don't have any other money, the odds of them getting these houses are very slim because like you said, the listing agent knows it's probably not going to appraise out anyways. So they want to find a buyer that's going to pay it even though it doesn't appraise out.
Aren't the appraisers though, just to, Tia had asked me, Tasia asked me this question. So Bob, aren't the appraisers allowing for appreciation though a little bit? They gotta be.
No, I don't think
they're
so.
Not?
They're not, no. And even if they're really not, no. And it's crazy because there is a section in the appraisal that says declining market, stable market, appreciating market. And it's always stable. Like very rarely have I seen, even back in 08, 09, 2010, when the market was crashing, we never saw, the appraisers check that declining market box. And now in this market, we're still seeing stable. But yeah, I really think it just comes down to the comps are the comps, and it is what it is, right?
And especially this time of year, because appreciation does not always just go up on a certain slant. It can step up, and I think right now, and I'll pick on Braintree, I think it's spiking. It's not just going up; it's spiking. And when you flip the calendar into the new year, it becomes a big. This is the time of year where it's the biggest challenge because this sets the pace probably for the near future. And so the comps are going to be even tougher when you've got a step up spike for the appraisers. Yeah. But that is the reality.
And it's driven by the buyers, right?
Yeah.
It's driven by the buyers in that market at that time. So don't be shocked when the house doesn't appraise out,
Have you guys been seeing the appraisals come in low for the listing agent side or buyer agent side? Has anyone run into that lately?
I think we're bound to in the near future. But again, to your point, Kristen, you got multiple offers as a listing agent. It would be great if you had a cash buyer or a high down payment buyer. If you got an FHA buyer, there's more likely to be a problem with the appraisal than if you get someone at 25-30% down.
Right.
It's still challenging, but you got to go with a higher number. It's because that's what's going on.
Right. Right. Brad, did you have a question?
You're on mute, Brad.
Am I the only one that hears that?
No.
Problem with the sound. Yeah.
There's an issue with your mic, Brad. Yep.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
In regards to the, while Brad's getting that fixed, one thing to remember, especially in a competitive situation, if your buyer is ready to dive headfirst into this house, if they're putting 20% down or more and going conventional, there's a good chance that we on the lender's end could get granted an appraisal waiver from Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So what that means is that we're submitting a loan and Fannie Mae says basically based on what our computer algorithms are showing and that sort of thing and the strength of the borrower's profile, we won't require an appraisal on this transaction. And it's honestly like hitting the lottery when you get that. And it doesn't necessarily matter. Just sometimes the value does make, the difference, the value that we put in or the price that we put in. But a good example of just how, I guess, generous these programs can be is I did a refinance for my mother-in-law recently, who owns a 3-bedroom cape in Abington, and it's 120 years old. And the house is probably worth, I don't know, 475, maybe at most, even in this market. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were giving us an appraisal waiver up to $800,000 on the refi. So it's just one of those things where, you know, I don't know what Fannie was drinking that day, what Fannie had put in her coffee, but it can be pretty liberal.
Have you been seeing a lot of those? Have you been seeing a lot of those waivers? I mean, I've had a couple of them happen as a listing agent for the buyer side being waived, but do you see that more now, or is it still slight?
But no, I would say it's almost 50%. I would say
really
between 30 and 50% of our deals.
The funniest part is when we get one and the listing agent has never like heard that that's a thing, and they think that we're trying to like pull one over on them. I'm like, and they're like kind of on edge even through the whole thing, waiting for the call from an appraiser. I'm like, you're not going to get one.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Brad White, Norwell. I've got a beautiful little gem coming on the market on Second Cliff in Situate. It has never been on the market. It's about 75 years old. It was part of an estate. It appraised 2 years ago at $550,000. Little tiny house, about a 10,000 square foot lot. I just sold a sister property. We just closed on it last week with the abutting available raw land. And my question is, I'd like to put it out at $625,000, but we have a tenant. So what's the latest, newest? The tenant's been there for 40 years, paying rent, right on time, great tenant. But we'd like to sell this piece. So $625,000 is my best guess. And what's the latest on what we do with the tenant?
Well, the biggest challenge is the tenant going to allow the showings to happen? Because the seller isn't going to get any offers if the tenant's going to be difficult about access to the property. So I would go the route of, set the expectations with the seller of, I can't guarantee what the price results are going to be, but I can tell you that we can't get the highest price if the tenant isn't willing to cooperate. So,
we have, the tenants are friendly, the sellers are friendly, so we don't anticipate any issue. The tenant works actually in downtown Situate, so the house is vacant. So if you go on lockbox, it needs a lot of work. I mean, nothing's happened to it since 1970.
Are the tenants going to be moving out when they sell the house?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, because we will probably need to displace the tenant. We have talked about tacitly giving notice to the tenant. I think the tenant knows that, but she has not been formally noticed. We've been waiting for January 30th to happen to see what's going on with the eviction laws, and we don't want to evict. Give her some time. 3 months, 6 months, whatever she needs. So, but we have to. I mean, does anybody have any experience with that right now?
Yeah, I think the way to start is just by reaching out and asking the tenant.
Yeah.
I mean, just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to have that conversation. I got one that's been on hold for a couple of months now, and the tenant has shown no indication that they're moving out. And I'm waiting for the attorney to tell me what the next steps are.
So what you're saying is that the tenant is not cooperating?
Correct.
Yeah, I think Steve LeBlanc and I had an issue with somebody, I don't remember who it was, Whitman, that there was an open house and the tenant wouldn't allow people in, and the tenant said, we're not leaving. And the seller just took a huge hit, like took $100,000 off just to get rid of the problem. So thanks for that good news.
Hey Brad, I've got a listing I'm trying to take, but I can't. It was on the. I'm talking to the seller about it. He had a buyer, but he could not, through another agent, and he could not sell it because the tenant didn't get out. It's a Section 8, and so he wants to list it again. And I've reached out. And my approach, I said, hey, best thing to do is talk to the tenant, offer, in this case here, offer to help her find her next move, which is into, some Section 8 housing or whatever, work that. And when it come down to it, and we worked through that and it didn't work, he's got only one recourse, so he's going to have her there. is to evict her. Attempt to evict her based on, whatever he can do. So he's hired I gave him a name of attorney to do it. And it comes down to that. You got to work that one there. There's no other alternative I know of.
Well, what is the law right now? The law was protective of tenants in a protected class due to COVID. So has that changed? I don't see through Mass Real Estate that it's carried forward. Does anybody know?
Don't know.
It was expired in October, but then they extended it again. And my brother and I were talking about this the other day, and I can't remember what he said about it being extended. So I think it's still going on, but I think it's almost up, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think there's a federal one that's still active.
First.
That what? When is it?
The federal one is until March 31st.
March
Yes.
31st. Okay.
Oh.
Yep.
It might still going.
So maybe
in my situation, that's what this particular tenant is kind of leaning on, is the federal.
But you start the process. You have to start the process. If you don't start the process and you wait till March, it's another how many months? So
right. No, they've been issued their legal documents from the attorney to vacate and
cease and desist. Yeah, and that's your options in this market here. That's what I found.
So I think we ought to have the discussion with the tenant and say that we're going on the market and say that she's protected. We're happy to give her 90 days, which is past March. And we don't want it to be acrimonious by any means, but also don't want to pass a problem. Somebody buys the property. What are they going to say to me? I mean, when is the tenant going to be out? Am I buying a property with a tenant in it? I mean, how do you pitch that?
Well, that's going to be on what the buyer's looking for. I mean, the buyer may be wanting to buy it to move in themselves, most likely if it's a single family home. So, unless they wanted it for a rental property, they're probably going to ask it to be empty. Yeah, vacant.
Yeah. Okay.
You're going to get the highest price if you can guarantee that it's vacant. Now, I would have the conversation with the tenant, and I wouldn't be beyond, if you get some cooperation, I wouldn't be beyond offering them money as a term for them to move out by closing.
Yep.
And flash some money in front of them, because you're going to get more. The seller's going to get more if the tenant is out of there, and if the presentation can be like that, to the market, you'll get the highest and best price. If it comes with a tenant, you're not going to get that crazy number.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? 3 months?
And then you can help them find the property.
What would you offer? 3 months rent? More?
What's the
I can help on this.
What's the rent?
He said offer 3 months rent.
Huh?
He said offer 3 months rent.
What is the rent though? How much is the rent?
$1,500. I'm just throwing a number out.
I'd offer
$1,500.
That sounds to me like that's a second cliff house.
Yes.
You could have a crazy $50,000 swing there. I'd offer a minimum of $5,000. I just would. If I knew that I could just get that property wrapped up where the tenant's moving, I wouldn't. And this is I believe this kind of stuff is going to be pretty common with multifamilies and things like that. So I would say start with the conversation. Your friendly tenant. Does this person already know the house is going to be going on the market at some point?
Well, I just put a sold sign up next door for the property, and she's seen me working out there the last couple of years. And the seller, my same seller, has had a tacit light conversation with her, but nothing formalized. So the seed has been planted. It's embryonic, but we're coming, February 2nd here, time to sell. And I'm just trying to give my seller some recommendations.
I would have the conversation like Robin said and see where that goes and be prepared to offer some money and have that. I'm not an attorney, but have that, put in writing somehow where they would get money at closing. I don't know. There's got to be some attorneys that would have a strategy that you could if you got a tenant that's willing, because if she knows she's going to be moving out at some point, if she can get a good chunk of change. That would unless she really plans on just hunkering down and not cooperating, offering her that money would just get her more apt to want to move. But I think $5,000 minimum.
I think my seller will probably go to 10,000 to sweeten it because they're nice people. You know, they don't want to hurt. So, and then she's got to find a place to rent and try to find a place to rent under $1,500 a month in Situate. Not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Zeb's going through this right now. Zeb, what's your take on it?
I have two. One of my own that I'm asking a tenant to leave in this pandemic had to do with rent. And the other side of it was that he decided since he wasn't working as much, he was going to start to scrap junk and started bringing some of that into the property. So you know what I do is I keep a log on it. And then whether it's your client or yourself, is that you give everything to the courts. And when the judge gets it, besides looking at rent owed, which the judges right now have somebody on the Zoom calls with them from a place called Raft and a couple other agencies, that what they're doing is the tenant can talk to that person on Zoom while you're there or afterwards and get the money to pay in full. So there's a lot of money from the federal government to help these people that are behind if they're using the COVID as an excuse. If they're hurting the property, then you can get a little further along because of what they're doing to the property. I'm selling a house, single family, and as soon as we listed it, we sent the tenants a notice prior to putting it on the market with a 30-day notice to quit to ask them to move out. Knowing that if they didn't, we can get into a summary process right away as soon as the property went under agreement and they weren't out by the date of the closing. Hold on. So and I have a statement written up, got it yesterday, told the attorney what I'd like to see in there, then she could address it as they wanted to put it in more legally. And it just states that if you're out by a certain date, any back rent would not have to be paid. The seller's already okayed that we offer some money to them, but I'm talking to the tenant more often than the seller. When the seller talks to the tenant, it doesn't go well. There's a lot of emotions happening there. So as the agent, he's agreed to move out by this weekend and not have to pay any of the back rent. Yet the seller was also going to offer him money at the same time. Here's the part that's costing the seller a lot of money, is the rate lock. They've had to come up with money on 2 occasions to push the rate out, which is a little beyond me how that works because the rates have gone down. And I thought maybe he could just start the finance process again. So maybe Bob can enlighten me on that a little bit. So the rate lock is costing the seller money, as then he's losing a couple months rent. And usually if you do a buyout, what I have found in the past is I've given them 1 month's rent to get them out because it's going to cost me that much. Probably if I have a constable go down there with a moving truck and move their belongings, wherever it's going to be, that's an open door. You just don't know how much that's going to be. And it's happened to me 3 times. And there's only certain companies that can do that by the state. The state approved people that can move somebody out without them being home.
And that'd probably be in a situation where they're not cooperating, right? So
they cooperate pretty quick when they got to go find they call you up pretty fast when they can't find their belongings.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Brad's clients are going to do that to that lady, but yeah, you never know. All right. So, so as far as strategies for listing properties right now, what is anyone doing anything different than what we discussed before?
I can't say I'm doing anything different than I've done in the past.
Okay.
A little bit different than I think maybe what some of us are doing. But we have a lot of people on the call today, so I can't assume that that's the truth. So I've been at this 19 years, and regardless of what the market conditions are, I've always found the best practice to be, okay, look at the comps. And we know right now the comps are out the window, it doesn't matter, but look at the comps so that you can at least set an expectation for the sellers. Because I find in my experience that they're most comfortable when they have information. And then if they want to dig their own grave, then, you know, let them do that. But we need to give them the information and, you know, be the professionals that we are. So in every market, regardless of the market conditions, I've always gone with the strategy of sort of a range of expected sale price.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's really wide, huge, enormous. And I let them know, you know, based on the comps, this is what I can prove to you.
Mm-hmm.
If we're able to sell anything for higher than the highest number that I anticipate in the range, then great, it's all frosting on the cake. So this is what I can prove to you, but I do expect that if you properly prepare your home, then we're going to meet this expectation easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next part of the conversation is, how do you want to look at this? How do you want the result to turn out? Do you want to hit the target of the range, of that high end of the range? Great, then price within the range. If you want to risk it and, you know, price it much higher, I can't guarantee that result. It may happen, but it may not. You may get one offer and you may not like the terms, or you may get two offers and you may not like the terms, and you'll still have to make a choice. But if you have, you know, 15 offers or 20 offers, that really puts you back in the driver's seat, and you can really dictate and negotiate strongly with the party that you like most.
Mm-hmm.
So I've found, you know, throughout history, from my own experience, that strategy has always worked. So with that said, last year in 2020, there were 2 listings that I did not secure because I was low on the price. And as Kristen and Bill have said, they were shocked when the prices, sold price was even much higher than the asking price, which we thought was outrageous as well. I mean, there's a home for sale directly across the street from my house right now. I live on Thicket Street in South Weymouth. I want to say it's like, I don't know, 50 something Thicket Street. And it's this little blue farmhouse that I've watched for 15 years. And I couldn't believe that they asked like $629 for this house. And my thought was, how are they going to get over $550 for the thing? And of course, it's contingent. And I can't even believe it. So clearly it's not going to appraise, but maybe the buyer is in a situation where the appraisal has 0 impact on the sale. You know, who knows? I don't know. I don't know what will happen with that. But regardless, I think the most important thing is that to understand what's happening in the market is the most critical thing that you can have the conversation about presently with your client. So make sure that you're talking with them about, this is what I can prove to you based on the comps, but this is, I believe, is happening in the market for you based on what I've already seen happen for others. And then let them decide. And I always have the conversation with the seller too. If you're interviewing other realtors, I think that's great. But let's talk about the price that others are suggesting to you and really take into consideration what their strategy looks like. And I will definitely use Coda's script of, this isn't a comps market, this is a strategy market.
Mm-hmm. And really, who do you like and trust to help you through the process, and who can get it to the closing table? Because no matter what you price it at, if it's not overpriced, the market's going to dictate and run it up. I mean, most of the houses are going well over asking anyway. So I think it doesn't even boil down to a price at this point. I think if you can have that conversation with the sellers, is choose who you trust and that you know is going to get you to where you need to go, and that can keep the transaction together. Right. And help you make an educated decision on what the best buyer is for what you're looking for. Right.
Agreed. And I think a big part of it too is setting some expectations with them about the appraisal. Mm-hmm. Sellers, you'll have the conversation with the seller of, you know, I really don't think the appraisal is going to come in for all these reasons and all these comps that we've already talked about. So you could be leaving $20,000, $40,000 on the table. Do you have the risk tolerance for that? And some of them do, and some of them don't. So we can't tell them what to do. They have to make their own decisions. And if they want to risk maybe, you know, some sort of implosion or renegotiating, if the appraisal comes in low, then great, go that route. We can't make the decisions for them. So this gets back to that critical conversation of the first consult. You know, what would make a great transaction for you? What's most important to you? The more fiercely we're conversing with our clients, the more likely they are to choose us, because we will have built their trust and have the rapport that they're hopefully looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are sellers who go with, well, this one promised me, this is what my house is worth. You know what? That's a client that you probably can never satisfy anyway. So then you decide, do I want to take that stress on or do I not? And granted, we want the business, but sometimes it's not always about the business.
Right. Bernice, how are you pricing houses?
Oh my gosh, you try to be funny, Kristen.
Listen,
you know what my story
is.
My last few listing appointments, I did not get them for the same reason. I was going at what market value was, and they went with agents who priced the property higher, and I mean they sold at like $40,000-$50,000 higher, and I was like, what the hell? Like, what's wrong with me? What am I not doing?
We're all doing the same thing, Bernice.
Yeah, so I jumped on this call so I can hear what other folks are doing, but I do like the fact that you guys, I don't know if Dakota's on the call or not, but
she's not.
That comps market versus like a strategic market is right on the money. Like we know we can't say we promise that a property is going to sell at a certain amount. And it's just getting the seller to trust you as the agent who's going to get them the maximum amount or the best end results. And so I'm really on this call to get information, Kristen. I mean, I'm struggling with the pricing right now. And in the past, I've been pretty good at it. But yeah, I'll be honest. I'm struggling with the pricing too. So
yeah,
I have a listing appointment today too. So
and you're going to get it. You're getting it. Yeah, I mean, Bill talked about this earlier, and I think sometimes it has to do with the price point too. But if you're looking, and again, Bill and Dakota and I were talking I don't even know now, a couple weeks ago, but what she does is she'll pull up, and I think we've all done it, but it's a matter of how you actually explain it to the seller. So she'll pull up the price range she feels that it's in, right? And she'll bring that list of all the listings and say, okay, it was priced at this and it sold for this, it was priced for this and sold for this. Then she'll see where the gap is when people want to kind of overprice it. And she'll say, look, this one was priced at X, but it sold less. But all these other ones that were priced less all sold for more. So let's be in this category where we're pricing it here so that we know that we're going to be getting more. But I think it's really on the conversations that we have with them and really how their personality is, because honestly, I thought I nailed both of mine. I'm like, there's no way they're picking somebody over me. It's not. And I know I was against two others, and I'm like, there's no way these other agents gave them more info than I did or went over anything or spent the time, and I still didn't get it. So, we're all in the same boat with getting them or not. But I think now at this point, since so many of us have had this happen recently, that, I'm more inclined to go a little on the higher end of what I think that it is and look in that higher price range and see if there's anything that's sold that's comparable and not take into consideration that I think I was taking too much in consideration was the lack of upgrades in the house and the situation of the wallpaper and the leak and the this and the outdatedness instead of just saying, like Dakota said, like they just care about 4 walls and a door and a window. Like, like people just need a house. They don't even care about that stuff anymore. And it seems evident to me based on, how much houses are selling for. They're in those conditions.
Can I clarify something real quick? Yes. And this is Bob and Sam, I guess, a big part of this. So in a situation where, you've got a house that you priced correctly, it got a ton of showings, you've got, multiple offers and they're different flavors, different types of financing, that sort of thing. So in having this conversation with the seller and setting the expectation, if we price it here, this is what we can expect in terms of offers. The thing about the appraisal coming in low, just so I'm clear, what's the guidance that you're going to talk to your seller about in terms of the least risky offer? How would that offer look?
Well, yeah, because I think what you're getting to, and tell me if I'm wrong, Bill, but we've talked about it on this call, it comes up consistently. It's not always about the number, it's about the value, right? And what is the pain point that your seller, we're trying to satisfy for the sellers, right? Maybe it's quick closing, maybe it is the price, maybe it's something else, but it's about finding, you know, so when you're talking about the least risky offer, you're talking about the one that really provides the most value in a lot of ways, right? So if I'm coming in FHA 100,000 over asking, you probably don't want to accept that offer, or at least talk through it with the other agent possibly. You know, but it's about finding that value piece. And yeah, if somebody's 3% down and they're 50 grand over asking, even if it's conventional, if the appraisal comes in and they don't have the extra money to make it up, you probably don't want to go with that offer, because you know that you're gonna, you know, you've seen that movie before, right?
So to determine if they have that extra money to make it up, that's a conversation that the listing agent needs to have with that buyer's lender.
I would say, well, primarily what I would say is that's a conversation that the listing agent has to have with the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent then has to talk with the buyer and the lender, so we can all get on the same page about the best way to, you know, basically satisfy that, right?
Right. Okay. Versus you're got another one in hand that they're putting 20% down, mortgaging 80%, conventional. So if it comes in shy on the appraisal, there's still a question though as to whether the buyer has the money to make up the difference.
Yeah, and a mortgage contingency too. I mean, we introduced PMI, and maybe they, even if they're putting 20% down, maybe their debt ratio is too high to get approved. You know, if your debt ratio is higher with 20% down for one buyer than it is for the other buyer with 3% down, your 20% down person's not getting approved, you know, even though they have all that extra money. With Dodd-Frank and some of the new ability to repay rules, not even new, they're like 10 years old now, right? Nothing matters more than the income on paper. Even someone, I mean, how many realtors are on this call that have a ton of money in the bank or looking to buy a house, but their Schedule C didn't show enough income, right? Nothing matters more than income and the ability to repay from a lending perspective now. And that goes for credit, assets, mortgage history, all that sort of stuff. One thing real quick, since we're getting towards the end here, don't forget too that house prices are expensive, but and ridiculous, but so too are interest rates. And really there's the two drivers behind the crazy market we're seeing right now is the low inventory, but also the stupid low interest rates. You know, a year ago, if someone took out a $400,000 loan at 4%, which is still a great rate over 30 years, that principal interest payment is $1,909. Today, if somebody takes out $475 at 2.625% over 30 years, that payment's $1,907. So people now can borrow $75,000 more and have their payment be $2 a month less than this time last year. So yeah, they're paying more for these houses, but their monthly payments are likely much less. And that's the reason people can come out and just say, yeah, I'll go 50 grand over asking, or 50,000 more than, I would have when we were looking at houses this time last year, you know?
Deb has a question for Bob.
I do, Bob. Quick question. And this has to go back to the problem I'm having with the tenant and keeping the sale together with my seller paying the rate lock.
Yep.
And you kind of hit on a little bit, when the interest rate's as low as they are, and the interest rate's not going to change for this fella, it's not going up. So it seems to me that paying for a rate lock by the seller to keep the deal together, why is that happening when the rates aren't going up yet they're going down? Why does somebody have to keep paying for the rate lock?
Sure, good question. And it's really, there's two reasons. One is to keep, and this is the lesser of the two, I think, reasons, but one is to keep buyers from, basically buyers need to have a stake in the game, right? And if it was just okay for buyers to lock and then rates dropped even a hair tomorrow, they bounce to another lender, then another lender. So that's one. But the second, and I think most important reason is every time a lender locks an interest rate, when they're hedging loans themselves, when they have their own loans, if you're talking with a mortgage broker or something, it's different. But when you're talking with a mortgage banker, like most of us work with here, when we lock a loan, we pay per diem interest on that money. So for example, just to give you a good example here, Zeb, to lock in or to extend a rate lock for 15 days at Radius, it's just a hair over 1/4 of a percentage point. It's like 0.275%, somewhere around there for 15 days. And it's just a little over half a point for 30 days. There's no extra margin built into that cost. That's just the buyer now paying Radius's cost to keep that rate lock there.
Or the seller in his case.
Yeah, well, yeah, the seller in your case, right? And so it's really just paying the hedging costs for, for the lender. And the reason that we can lock in someone for 30 days initially or 60 days right off the bat is because the hedging costs are built into that interest rate quote. So if I lock somebody today at 2.5%, theoretically, if we didn't have any hedging costs, maybe I could have offered 2 3/8 or 2 1/4, but that original lock has those hedging costs built in. What your person, at Radius, one of our policies is you can cancel a rate lock and then relock at market 60 days after that. So depending on the kind of, whether you see a light at the end of this tunnel or not, Zeb, for that seller, maybe that your seller or buyer, whoever it is, could cancel that rate lock, take on a little bit of risk, and then relock on April 2nd or whatever that lender's policy is. But I'm sure that they have a relock at market policy. And I don't think that, and I guess what they would do at that point is just compare their hedging costs over the next X number, or sorry, the extension fees over the next couple of days, your seller, or sorry, next couple of months, and compare that to what is almost like a worst case scenario 60 days from now. Maybe 60 days from now, rates are a little bit higher, but they could pay points to buy their rate back down to where it is now. And if those points 60 days from now are less than what they would pay for an extra 60 days in extension costs or whatever it is they need, maybe that's the better option to go. And worst case, what are rates going to be? Worst case, 3% at the end of Q1, so we're, not too far off of where rates won't be too far off of where they are right now.
So you're buying the money and having it held to the side. That's what
exactly what it is. Yeah. Yeah. We lock in that money at a certain price tag and reserve it for delivery whenever closing is, 30 days, 60 days from now.
You want to speak to it or you let it expire?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? We have like 2 minutes left.
There's a lot of topics going on within this topic, pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I want to say is that this may sound a little bit strange, but I just, with the sale I just did, I was the buyer's agent. And if I was the listing agent, I would not have believed what I, as the buyer's agent, ended up pushing this sale to. And that's really hard to grasp, because I know what the listing agent was thinking, and I looked at the comps and everything. And if I was that person, I probably would have priced it where that person did, but I wouldn't have believed it went for what it did, and other offers were even higher than what I offered. And that may sound a little strange, but it's not about comps. It's about, like, I went over to the open house and I saw that there was tons of people showing up and offers coming in. And so it's not about comps anymore. It's about just getting it. And so, that's why, to Kristen's point, that, she'll come in and do a great presentation, and then they just go with a higher one and it goes higher. It's a crazy market right now. It just is. And so that kind of just really resonated with me.
So I think the general consensus here is we should just go get more listings.
Absolutely.
Just go get the listings, because as Bill knows, working as a buyer's agent ain't fun right now, is it?
Yeah, Kirsten, why don't you just say that in the first place? Is that all we have to do is get listings?
Just get listings and just let the seller pick whatever price they want and go for it. I mean, hey, that's all you can do these days, I think. So awesome. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so I don't want to hold you guys up. You have a 1 hour break to lead generate and practice your scripts, whatever you're doing, and see me at 11 o'clock if you want. Millionaire Real Estate Investor, 11 o'clock. I'm going to be interviewing Kate Richard. You're going to be excited to hear how many properties she owns and where they are. So I hope to see you guys at 11, and I hope you have an awesome day.
Have a great day,
Thanks,
everybody.
Kristen.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.